Today we'll be talking about software testing in the cloud. Our presenter today is Dr. Tawhida Parveen. She's not only a PhD, but a CTFL, CTFL AT, which is Agile Testing, and CTAL TM, which is the Advanced Test Manager. Dr. Parveen is currently the University Department Chair of Software Engineering at Kaiser University in Melbourne, Florida. She is also an independent consultant and trainer working in software testing and cloud computing. She completed her PhD in computer science from the Florida Institute of Technology and her MBA from the University of Central Florida. Dr. Parveen is an ISTQB certified tester and instructor, and she serves as a member of the ASTQB, that is the American Software Testing Qualifications Board. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Parveen and let her take us through the world of testing in the cloud.
Thank you, Dave. Well, you've introduced me very well, which means I don't have to go through this introduction slide myself. So thank you for that introduction. Well, today we're going to talk about software testing in the cloud. What is my motivation or your motivation for this talk? I'm sure you have heard a lot about the cloud, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of people say, well, it's a hype, it's not real. Then on the other hand, other people may say, well, it is real. So I'd like to tell you that it is actually here to stay. It is changing the way we're developing software today. It is changing the way we're deploying software today. And I think it's time it should change the way we test software today as well. Cloud computing is very powerful. It has a lot of, it includes a lot of things. It includes a lot of technology, and I believe that we can actually use them for testing. And I think that's what our motivation today for this talk. I always like to start all my talks with a nice, appropriate Dilbert cartoon. So this one is for you. I'm going to give you like a few seconds to look at it. Well, hopefully, after this talk today, you'll have an idea of what cloud is about, how it's different from traditional computing environment. What does testing in the cloud mean to you? And what does it mean for testers? What do we need to do differently? How to approach testing in the cloud? Where to even begin? These are the couple of things that I'll talk about today. Let's start with a definition of cloud computing. What is cloud computing? First of all, at the bottom of it, it's virtualized hardware. You do have a few physical hardware, but everything else is virtualized. That's why it is so scalable. That's why it can provide need for hundreds and thousands of people at the same time. It is a services model. So everything that's deployed there is service. So what is service actually? We use services every day. We use electricity, we use water. When we need electricity, when we need water, we call somebody, they turn it on. We use as much as we need, and then we pay for as much as we need. It's not that you have electricity at home and then you buy it with a lot of money and then pay a huge amount of money and then don't use it. It's not that model. So cloud computing is exactly the pay-per-use on-demand model. As to you can rent it, you can borrow it, you can get it and pay whatever you use it. It has rapid elasticity. That's how it's able to scale up and scale down. So if you have a customer base for 1,000 people, then your computing power should be for 1,000 people. In the future, if your business scales up to say 10,000, you should be able to increase that number of computing power to that. So it has rapid elasticity. It's self-healing. So anything, when you deploy things in the cloud, it has to be, the infrastructure has to be in such a way that it has to heal itself. What does that mean? It has to, if a job stops, you may not be there to see what's going on. So it needs to restart it on its own. And a lot of the time, for people who are deploying applications in the cloud or testing them, it's not, most of the time, it's not in your control. But on the other hand, things are taken care of for you. So when you want the computing power, you ask for it and you get it. And it doesn't matter. You don't have to care about where it's coming from. So we have three cloud services model. At the top, we have software as a service. These are hosted software applications that are available to you, and you can use your simple thin client, like your browser, to access them. Most of you have used them. For example, Office Suite, Office 365 is an example of software as a service. Google Docs are example of software as a service. You can access Google Docs from anywhere. You can create PowerPoints, you can use Excel, Word, and you don't actually have to buy the software. You don't have to install it on your desktop. All you need is an internet access in your browser to do the work you need to do. So that's software as a service. The next one down is platform as a service. So the platform gives you access to the application development tools and your deployment environment. So it provides you with operating system, any kind of database solutions, developer tools, network support, virtual servers, and such. So why would you need that? Well, last term, I taught a class in mobile development, and I really wanted my students to actually create iOS apps. But not all my students have the Mac environment. So in that case, excuse me, in that case, I would use a platform as a service to have access to the development tools and the development environment. So my students can actually develop product without owning the software and the operating system themselves. The third model is infrastructure as a service. And you can think of it as a virtual data center in the cloud. It provides you with the servers, both physical and virtualized. It provides you with storage. For example, I use Dropbox a lot. So it's a very simple example of infrastructure as a service. It's letting me store all my documents and share it with other people. At the same time, let me sync it, all the content, with all the other devices that I have, phone, computer, multiple computers. In infrastructure as a service model, you have to install your own operating system, your own database solution. You're just basically getting the hardware resources from a provider. Now, what are the different types, different ways you can actually access the cloud? You have public cloud, private cloud, and hybrid cloud. Those are the three common ones. There are other ones now. There's one more called community cloud. But I just wanted to give you an idea of the three most common ones. So public cloud is actually available for use by almost anyone. Anyone can rent service from it. It is less secure, therefore, but on the other hand, it is less expensive. When you talk about the cloud model, the first question that everyone asks is security. Well, in order to address that, we have what's called private cloud. So private cloud is actually owned by a specific organization, and it is used by only that organization and its customers. And then the third one is hybrid. It's a blend of public and private. Private cloud has, of course, it has better security, but it is also expensive. So hybrid is actually used in cases where if you're an organization where you can actually use the public cloud to do some transaction which does not require to be secure, you can use the public cloud for that. And for any kind of security issues, privacy issues, you can go to the public part of the cloud. So that's what a hybrid cloud is. It's a combination of public and private. So that's a quick overview of some of the services that cloud computing provides and how you deliver them. But what are some of the benefits of this? One of the top one is it's faster, it's cheaper, it's better. Well, that actually, it depends on what you're using it for, okay? Yes, it is faster because you don't have to wait to set up a test lab. You don't have to wait to set up a development environment. You can actually launch it instantly. It is cheaper because you can rent the computing power instead of owning it. Sometimes you buy things and then you don't use them for a very long time. So it's cheaper that way. And it's better. The faster and the cheaper part sometimes makes it a little bit better as well. It is flexible. So think about testing from a testing point of view. You have multiple test beds. If you have an application that you need to test on multiple platforms, you have the flexibility now. It is scalable, and it is pay-per-use. So these are some of the benefits. More importantly, what I think you should be thinking about is everything today, it is the way of things today. Look at all the applications we had in the past that we call traditional software. For almost everything now, we have a cloud equivalent of that. That's because the way we think, the way we actually use things are changing today. So there is actually no way to avoid cloud computing or applications that are deployed in the cloud. So if that's the way of things now, what does that mean for testers? What does it mean for us? We don't see the cloud. It's kind of a black box to us. So if you are launching a test bed in the cloud, how do you know if it's correct or not? And if there is an error, where is that coming from? If you're testing applications in the cloud, what is affecting it? It's kind of the environment is a black box to us. You don't own it, so how do you report the defects? Who do you tell that the infrastructure may or may not be working? You don't have control over it. So you see, a lot of the service level agreements that we didn't really, as testers, think about much before, we have to now. That's actually part of our testing. What do you test? The infrastructure, the platform, the application. You have different layers now. And how do you test them? Traditionally, we thought about black box testing, white box testing. Well, now, as I said, you have services, you have process, you have integration. So how does that change our job, our task as testers? More importantly, where do you start? So my question to you, and we're going to come back to this slide at the end of this talk, is if you don't know this is the new Apple TV. And this slide is actually, the screenshot is taken from the Apple website. So I want you to think about how would you test this? You're a traditional tester. How would you test this? So what is software testing in the cloud? Before I define that, let me remind you the ISTQB definition of testing. We all know, those of you who have taken the ISTQB certification, you know that ISTQB defines testing as a process with all of its life cycle activities. It is both static and dynamic. We have certain activities such as planning, preparation, evaluation, analyzing, designing, evaluating exit criteria, all of those, of everything that comes out of a project, which includes the software product and all the other work products. That includes our test plan, test cases, and such. And it's a process to make sure that any specific requirements is satisfied, the requirements fit for purpose, so validation and verification. And then we also, during the whole process, we find and fix defects. So that's our definition of software testing. That doesn't change. So testing in the cloud includes that definition of software testing, but it also includes the part about cloud computing as well. You need to know the cloud. You need to know the layers of it. If you don't know it, you can't test it. It also requires you to understand system migration, because by introducing cloud computing, what is it that we're doing? We're actually migrating from one environment to another. I want you to think about testing as a legacy environment, as a legacy product. What do you do with legacy product? You migrate them to a new environment so they work properly. So here, testing, our process, is a legacy system. So your techniques, tools, environment, how do they change? If you're going to be testing the very same application in the cloud, what is it that you need to change? So software testing in the cloud, it's been my research for the last couple of years, and we call it STITCH, software testing in the cloud. It actually includes it has three aspects. Testing in the cloud, which means you're actually using the cloud infrastructure to help you with your testing process. Testing of the cloud, this is where you could be testing many things. You could be testing the platform itself if you are working for a cloud provider. You could be testing at the infrastructure level, or you could be testing the software that are actually created to be deployed in the cloud. And the last part, which actually ties with the top two, is migrating testing to the cloud. What are some of the changes that we need in the testing process to actually adapt to testing in the cloud? So we as researchers have come up, or my team has come up with these couple of things to begin with. First of all, you have to understand that you cannot achieve software testing in the cloud if you are considering testing as an execution-only activity. That's just not going to work, because testing in the cloud requires a lot of management aspect, a lot of process, and you have a lot of people involved in it. So three aspects of it: management, strategy, and roles and responsibilities. And under management, there are actually three other things that you need to look at: process, technology, and people. I'm going to touch base on each one of these. One thing that I've heard in the past, and I still hear when I talk to people, is there's a very common phrase in testing, which is, this is how we've been doing it forever. Well, it's time to change. I don't think that's going to work either. So it requires a mind shift as well. So let's start with management and the process part of management. So first of all, testing in the cloud is not for everyone. Yes, you have heard about it. Yes, it may be faster, cheaper, and better, but is it faster, cheaper, and better for what you're doing, for your organization? So you do need to have a SWOT analysis to figure out what are some of the strengths, weaknesses, and how can it help you for what you need. And once you have identified that, yes, it is important or it is valuable for you to actually move from your traditional testing strategy that you have now to actually go to the cloud and use cloud infrastructure to help with your testing, then you have to come up with a migration strategy. Where are you now, and where do you want to go, and how do you get there? And this is actually not new to testing. This is standard migration strategy. Anytime you migrate from one platform to another, from a legacy system that you change to a different platform, you do what's called a decision framework. You decide, is it worth migrating to the new environment? So in this decision framework, what I have here is sort of your business drivers. Why do you want to migrate testing to the cloud? And then you have to think about your technical factors. And then after you have had a positive answer from your business drivers, which means you know why you want to move to the cloud for testing, and you understand the technical aspects of it, then you can start by a small trial migration, small portion of it, maybe a small project, a pilot study, before you can actually go to an actual migration. You have to think about cost. Now, those of you who are test manager in the audience, if there are any managers, we know how good we are in estimating, right? So here, you have to really use your cost model. How much does it cost you to test now? That includes the whole, and you have to think about the whole testing process. And a test plan would come into help. Your previous test plan will help you in this. Do you have a test lab now, and how do you utilize it? Do you create an environment for every project that you use? How often do you configure your machines? And who's in charge of them? Who maintains them? Who upgrades them? So you can use something like an activity-based cost model where you identify each one of these activities and you put a dollar amount, whether the activities are big or small, because that will help you identify the way you're testing now. Should you stay this way, or should you actually, would it benefit you to migrate your testing to the cloud? You also need to evaluate your current process and if there is any overlap or not. So for example, if your organization or if your team has no clue about unit testing, you don't do unit testing at all, then it would be difficult for you to do anything in the cloud. If you don't have any sort of automation in place and all your testers are manual testers, then you need to actually bridge that gap first before you start loading your testers with all the cloud environment. So some things like agile development, test early, the idea or the concept of test early, test often, this becomes really important when you're thinking about the cloud. Because these are the things the cloud can help you with, but you have to have the process established already. The next thing you need to think about is technology. Yes, the cloud comes with a lot of new technology as well. Things you have heard, such as DevOps, testing as a service, Amazon Web Services, Hadoop, big data. These are all technologies that at some point, if you are testing in the cloud, you will come across. And maybe some of these, because a lot of these are distributed data processing technologies. If you think of test cases as a huge amount of data that needs to be processed, then all of these technologies will come in handy, because you could be using these technologies to actually create tools and scripts to aid in your testing. A lot of these technologies are also used for development. And so you also need to know how these things are being developed, because if you know how they're being developed, you can actually design your test cases better. Couple of the main technologies that we use in testing when it comes to testing in the cloud are testing as a service, any kind of distributed processing technologies, because they do come in handy for your testing. And test execution environment, which is actually today, that is the main thing, one of the most common thing we use cloud computing for, is to create test execution environments, test labs. But again, they're not easy. They're not, and as a tester, you have to do them. These things actually falls into your hands now, because if you're launching a test bed for, let's say, different platform, you can't wait on your system admin to do that for you. That's the beauty of cloud computing. You have it at your disposal instantly, but you'd have to know how to do that. All right, we come back to the Apple TV. I hope by now some of you have thought about how would you test this. Think about this as an example. And I actually, when I think about this, I think of it as an end-to-end testing. How would you test it from the user point of view? You have the box, you have the remote control, you have the device itself as a whole and its connection to other devices, and then you have the cloud for its streaming capabilities through this device. So the Apple TV is an example of not just the cloud. So it's cloud, mobile, server, a lot of things. So in this case, we have to do testing. We have to do what's called an end-to-end testing. We have to take each pieces. Think about your system testing. It just got huge. On top of that, you can now install apps on your Apple TV. And these apps, by the way, are deployed in the cloud. So let's talk about people. Now, if you are a traditional tester, would you be able to adapt to cloud testing or testing in the cloud? And what kind of help do you need? As management, can you provide that help? Can you provide training? Can you provide continuous education for them? Because believe it or not, the cloud is an environment, it's changing constantly. What about your testing skills? Do you have them? Do you know how to design test cases correctly? And do you have any programming skills? Because yes, in testing in the cloud, you're going to have to brush up your automation skills. You're going to have to write scripts. Even for using the tools that are currently available in the cloud, you do need some testing, programming, debugging skills. And of course, you have to have good communication skills as well, because now you're no longer talking to the system administrator who's in-house. You're talking to the cloud service providers. You need to look at their service level agreements and see what's there, and are you getting the service that they have promised you? Sometimes testing in the cloud can also become a legal aspect. Where are these servers located? Where are they coming from? Where is the data located that you're uploading? You may be testing at multi-level, which is actually very common in testing in the cloud. Services level, governance level, integration level, process level. So it's beyond black box and white box. It's more than that. You have to have a cloud testing strategy. So some of the question that you can ask is, does it change the foundation of testing? My answer to that is no, it doesn't. There's a certain way to actually test, to go through the whole testing process. That doesn't change. But if you don't know it, then you're not going to be able to go further. So you do need to have the foundation of testing. You have to understand, you have to have the tester's mindset. You have to be curious. Does it involve new techniques, technology, and domain? Yes, it does. And you have to also be able to grasp them, learn them fast. How is it going to affect your current job, your current task? Is it going to help you? Or is cloud computing going to hurt you? Yes, you do need new skills. How fast can you learn them? What kind of facility that your organization is going to provide you to learn them fast? There are different types. Your types of testing is going to be, you're going to have to expand that. There are some tools available, but they're not actually enough. As we know, tools are not the solution to everything, and it's no different when it comes to testing in the cloud as well. We don't have a lot of tools, and we definitely don't have a tool that will solve all our problems. Risk associated, just like you did risk assessment for your regular traditional testing, you have to do risk assessment here as well. But you also have to take into consideration the cloud infrastructure as a risk. In your strategy, you need to come up with what are your critical success factors. How do you measure them? Okay, is automation your success factor? Is skilled testers, test lab, test environment? What is it? What is your goal? What is it that you're trying to get out of testing in the cloud most? And if you know that, you also need to have metrics in place to figure out if you're doing good or not. You also have to continuously think about process improvement. Okay, your financial perspective. This was one of the main reasons you probably went to the cloud, to cut costs, to get faster feedback, to test often. So if that's the goal, then are you meeting that goal? Is the cloud helping you? Is testing in the cloud helping you on that? By moving to the cloud, did your bug count go down? Are your customers satisfied? What about your internal process? Are you fixing bugs faster because you have better feedback now? You have faster feedback. You can test more often. And then how are you going to continue to teach your testers all these technologies that are changing almost every day? That should go into your testing strategy. And our roles and responsibilities. So I believe most organizations have defined roles. That doesn't change here. You still have your developers who are primarily responsible for unit testing, and more so now for integration testing. From a tester's point of view, we have test analysts and technical test analysts. The ISTQB defines these two roles. And I believe it's very important when it comes to testing in the cloud. These two roles are really, really important. The test analysts are the designers. I believe, in my opinion, they're the one who should be implementing the cloud testing strategy. And the technical test analysts should be actually the testers. They're the one who should be helping everyone writing the script, basically implementing what you have planned. They're the one who should be testing as well. You need to involve your customers because they have access to the test lab now, much better than they had before. Who's going to be the point of contact to your cloud provider? And your cloud providers should be responsible for the service level agreement, the services testing of all the services that they're providing, the platform, the infrastructure. So what I wanted to do today is to tell you that software testing is a challenging activity. I also wanted to introduce you to some of the technologies, such as virtualization, cloud computing, services, model, web services, and I wanted you to let you know that if not now, in the future we will be, if we're not doing this already, we will be using all of these technologies to actually help us in our testing. You have to plan, you have to start early, and you have to know your goal for testing in the cloud. You also have to have a holistic system architecture, knowledge of that. So not only you have to have the knowledge of the system that you're testing, you have to have the knowledge of the system where you're testing it. Where you're testing it. So that's the cloud. You have to understand your test data and how migration of that data into the cloud, if you're testing there, affects anything. Affects security, affects privacy, location. You have to have good communication skills, communication with your vendors. These are the cloud providers. If anything goes down, they're your first point of contact. It's not a hype. The word big data is, we talk about it today a lot. It's actually huge. We always had data. We just didn't know in the past how to use them properly. If you Google for anything today, within the next time you open your browser, you have an ad for everything you Googled before, like, you know, in your previous session. That's the power of big data. We're gathering the data. We're looking at what kind of activities you do, and all of these get captured as big data. But now we have the power to actually extract information from that data. And cloud provides us with that infrastructure, with that platform, to actually process these big data to make them meaningful. So yes, it is here to stay because it's helping everything. It's helping business. It's helping every one of us. It's changing the way, it's changing our testing landscape. But it's not new though. We have seen this kind of shifts in the past. We used desktop applications in the past. And then from there, we went to the web. We changed how we test things, how we look at applications. Then from the web, we went to mobile. And today, if you are a business, if you're an organization, if you don't have an app, you're pretty much out of business to begin with. So consumers have changed the way they use applications today, and therefore it forces us as testers to change the way we test things. So cloud computing is here to stay, and I would suggest that you brace for change in testing. It happens to be that this is from the Wall Street Journal today. I was reading this morning. It says where the new jobs will come from. In 2007, iPhone application developers did not exist. And by 2011, Apple had 15 billion revenues from apps. So a lot of the jobs, future jobs, are going to include cloud computing, cybersecurity, big data projects. But here's a good thing for us, though. For every one of these, they are going to need testers. All we have to do is move with the technology and think about how we can leverage these for testing. But in order to know that, we need to know these technologies as well. I think that's all I have to say today. Software testing in the cloud is actually my PhD research, and when I finished my dissertation, I did a lot of work on it, and I used a technology called Hadoop. And then I actually put that together into a book. Just wanted to let you know that.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Parveen. That was a great session, and I'd like to invite anyone that has any questions, if you'd like to submit them via your user interface in GoToWebinar, to go ahead and submit those now, and I'll go ahead and run them by Dr. Parveen. We have one question that's already come in, and it asks this: can you expand a little on what drives the need for automated testing over manual/exploratory testing in the cloud, and what factors make manual exploratory testing less than desirable or more difficult in the cloud?
Well, so let me take one at a time. I think that the experience, or the ability to automate things, which basically comes down to, do you know how to write scripts or not? It's very important when it comes to cloud computing, because launching the test lab requires you to, you can do them manually, but eventually there's an overhead associated with it. So the way the test labs are launched from your computer to the cloud environment is through automated scripts. So you should be able to change them, configure them yourself, so you can launch them instantly. So that's the sort of the scripting programming part, the automation experience that I think you should have to some extent, all testers. The part about which is desirable, well, the automation that you used to do here, you actually have a better environment for automating things now, because you have more, you can instantly launch multiple platforms, different platforms. You can scale up, scale down. So you can't manually test all of these platforms. It will take a long time. So think about testing an application, let's say in Mac, Linux, Windows, right? 3 different platforms. Well, you can do them sequentially manually, or you can write, test scripts for one, configure it, and then change it for others. Because right now you actually have the platforms available. So that's where I think that having automation experience will come in handy. But again, I also want to say that by saying that automation is not the answer to everything. Not everything should be automated. It goes back to assessment. If you think that your test cases are taking too long or they are too complex, those would be candidates for automation. With cloud computing, there is an overhead associated with it. So you have to take that into consideration, that if you can test faster manually, then don't migrate it to the cloud and automate that. So I don't know if that answers the question or not.
No, I think it does. I think it does. Thank you, Carl, for that question. We have several other questions that have come in as well. Are there any specific or prominent test tools that we have for cloud testing, whether it be for UI or performance, functional testing, et cetera?
Yes, lots of performance and load testing tools are available. Not so much for functional testing, I would say. The reason being, it is difficult to have, it is difficult for performance. First of all, load and stress and performance testing are difficult, and their infrastructures are very, very expensive. So I think a lot of people are interested towards performance testing. Therefore, we have a lot of tool vendors who have created, test tools that are geared towards those type of testing. So yes, there are less for functional, a lot more for performance. Some for unit as well. There are a lot of like MR unit, MapReduce unit, and such. So there are some tools available for unit testing.
Good, good. We have another question that says, could you provide information or perspectives? Where are the real limitations in cloud testing? And I think you talked about that a little bit with some of the manual testing, but how would you describe the limitations of cloud testing? Where does it run into what it can't do?
So there are limitations, definitely, and I didn't put the limitations on my slide purposely. I wanted this talk to be a positive one. I would really think that your number one limitation would be your security and your privacy. So if you, because you need to look at your service level agreement to see where are the data centers located, because you have certain jurisdictions. So can your data be, sometimes a lot of these centers could be outside the country too. So I think your service level agreement becomes very, very important, and be able to read it and understand. So that is actually one of your testing object that you're going to test. Other things, there is a learning curve associated with it, and I also believe that the technology it's not easy. It's not impossible, of course, but I think that learning curve is what's going to slow us down a little bit, I believe, because you are on a cloud provider's infrastructure. It's unknown, so be able to bridge that learning curve would be a drawback, I believe.
Good. That's helpful perspective, but not too many drawbacks. It sounds like all in all, it's a great move.
Actually, in my opinion,
go ahead.
In my opinion, I don't think there is a lot of drawback at all. I love the cloud. I think it's amazing. It is giving us an opportunity to do so many things that we couldn't do before, like test often, test early, share these with people. I think it's amazing. And in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of drawback. They can be fixed.
Good, excellent. There was a somewhat related question. There was a question regarding cybersecurity, and I don't know if you can answer this in this form, or if it would deserve some follow-up at some point. But there's a kind of a statement/question that said the cloud helps with cybersecurity, obviously through testing and through some various access points, I guess. But will it or can it help hackers in developing their reverse methods? Is there any downside from a cybersecurity standpoint of cloud testing beyond the fact that it's even just a remote, platform to some degree?
Are you asking that is it more open to hackers? Is that the question?
I'm not so sure if it's that directly, and Levi might be able to provide some additional information here if it's not clear in the question. I think it was maybe in the sense that they can see how things are being tested. Maybe there's some concern that the software would be developed perhaps with the cloud in mind, and therefore may have certain structural elements that then could be exploited because of it being developed with perhaps cloud testing in mind. And maybe that's not a real concern.
Well, honestly, for me, I think it's not everything is out in the open. I think of it this way. If you have information in Facebook, then hackers can get information from Facebook, from an organization's employee, and if they can get that, if they can understand a trend of what you're developing, how you're testing from there, they can get it from here. So, as a tester, you shouldn't be using real data. As a tester, you should not. I mean, we have all these testing, security testing in place. You still have to use those good testing practices as well. So I don't think that's cybersecurity as a general is a big problem, but this is not. I don't think it's any bigger than what cybersecurity problem we already have.
Okay, good. We have a question talking a little bit about the cloud service of Apple TV. Could you, what they're asking is, could you please explain more about cloud service in Apple TV. I still don't understand why it is a cloud service.
Well, you're getting the streaming part of it is using the cloud. The apps, because now in Apple TV you can actually install any apps that you can install in your mobile devices. You can play games on it now. So these are all hosted in the cloud.
Okay, good.
So right now, in addition to testing the device, testing the remote, testing all its connections and everything, you are also, which again, the connections are also using cloud infrastructure as well. So now you have all these apps that you're going to individually have to test and test to see if they're streamed properly and working properly or not.
Okay, good. Another question that we had is, it says, how has TDD changed when it comes to cloud computing compared to what we have been working with Agile, extreme programming, or iterative models?
It doesn't. Test-driven development is a concept. That concept doesn't change. It's the technology that will change. So TDD is basically test-driven development applied mainly at unit level. So, when you're using these, if you're writing application to be deployed on the cloud, you may be using some other. So, for example, one example is Hadoop that we use for distributed data processing, and it's a different programming model. So, therefore, you have to use a different, I would say, instead of, let's say, JUnit, you're using MRUnit. So you're using a different tool to write your unit test cases. But you can still write them test first. My point on that slide was that if you don't have TDD or test first or test often or even unit test in place, then migrating to the cloud, you may face some problem because you don't have the established process there. But that concept doesn't change.
Okay, and that makes sense.
And let me add to that. In fact, it actually makes it better because in the past we had to run, the massive amount of unit test cases sequentially. But the cloud actually allows, if you can structure it properly and if you can write the program properly, it can allow you to concurrently execute the unit test cases. So that way, when 500 unit test cases required, I don't know, maybe an hour, now it's going to take a couple of minutes. So it actually helps.
Right. It sounds like the fundamental ability to test and to understand the proper ways to go about that continue to be important with the cloud. And so that kind of also adds to the idea of ISTQB certification, how it either helps testing in the cloud or if, say, you are foundation certified. What would you recommend as a next step in terms of preparing for testing in the cloud?
I would say if you are, once you have done the foundation, I would actually really focus on the technical test analyst. I think that if you are testing in the cloud space, I believe that would help you a lot. I think it will help you with your programming skill, be able to understand code, understand scripting, and be able to implement the test cases that you're designing. I think that would be one recommendation I would do. I would provide. I also think that the test manager, the ISTQB test manager syllabus does provide a lot of good techniques for